Welcome to the Nano podcast. I'm your host, Will Tjernlund, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of nano-cap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of nano-cap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. And in this week's episode, I have Sam Rubin, the CEO of LightPath, stock ticker LPTH. LightPath is a fully integrated manufacturer and supplier of visible and infrared optical components and subsystems. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Sam.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Will.
So I like to start with all guests. Tell me just a little bit about your life before your LinkedIn starts. It looks like you went to college for mechanical engineering in Israel, but please tell me just kind of what got you on the engineering path, a little bit about your life growing up, and kind of what got you on the path you are on today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you should mention it. It's like, if something isn't on LinkedIn these days, it doesn't exist, right? That's sort of
Exactly.
the assumptions there. Yes, I've actually, as you can see on my LinkedIn, I spent my whole career really in optics. But the way I got at it is very interesting because it's actually almost like to say it's in my DNA, inherited. My dad worked at Laser Industries, which was the first company to ever make a medical laser. And so I remember growing up as a child, hearing from him about all these wonderful things that they do. And I'm a techie. I probably knew by the age of 5 that I'm going to be an engineer. And so growing up, hearing about all this amazing technology of optics and lasers and what it can do and how the first lasers they're shipping can be used in an operating room almost left me no choice but to really, pointed my life in the direction of going into optics. And so by the time I went into university to start my undergrad, I already had a few years of I feel like, optics under my belt, just from, the symbiosis of being near my dad and hearing everything he talks about and his work. And at some point he started his own business, and like many other small businesses, at first was working from home. So I literally had an optics company in the room next door to me, right? So it really, pointed my life in that direction, which I'm very, very happy about, because what ended up being is I was so immersed in this life that halfway through my undergraduate in electronic engineering, I already was publishing papers and started academic research and started a PhD when I was already in my 3rd year of my undergrad. And so from there, it was a very easy path into starting my own startup, which, we're talking about late 90s in Israel. In Israel, in the late 90s, starting a startup was like a national sport. All you needed to do is have an idea related to optical communication, and you could get funding pretty much. And that was the case. And so on my 4th year of my undergrad, when I was already deep into the PhD, my advisor and I started a startup company called Xlight, which was commercializing fast switching optical lasers. So lasers that could change their wavelength really quickly. And the idea was, back in the 90s, everyone felt that the networks will not be able to handle the amount of data that is needed. Optical switching is the key for the future. Routers based on silicon are just going to not handle the load, so you have to do switching in the optical level, going very technical. It actually happened, but it happened 20 years later. So what we were working on 20 years ago is happening now, pretty much. And so that startup, changed direction like many startups do, ended up actually still selling it off to a telecom company. So was able to do a bit of money, and then moved to the US and did my MBA. And from there already LinkedIn started. So probably, you can track the rest of my life just by looking at the profile.
No, I love the idea that you're the kid that all the people who are just graduating with their undergrads complain about, where they go, "This is an entry level job. How can they require 6 years of experience?" But
Yeah,
you already had the 6 years of
yeah,
experience coming
pretty
out of
much.
the
Yeah,
undergrad, and
yeah,
then moving from that to the often theme in technology of your idea wasn't wrong, just the timing was wrong.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
that
Pretty much.
you're
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, it's great. It's funny. I get notifications about papers that I published if they get referenced, and suddenly some paper from 24 years ago is getting referenced a lot now. And it's really because that's a point where I realized that what we were working on back then is now being commercialized. But it's just satisfying to see it happen.
There's a great coffee table book of companies that failed in the late 90s, early thousands, during
Yeah.
the dot-com bubble, and every single one of them is some sort of unicorn today, where it's
Oh,
food
yeah.
delivery on
Yeah.
demand, cabs
Yeah. Yeah.
called through the
Exactly.
internet, and
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
where everyone was right, but they were all wrong at the same time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you can probably spend a whole podcast just talking about Apple making a living from taking old ideas and reviving them and
Exactly.
getting the credit for it. But yeah.
And so okay, so the idea of you coming up with X-Light makes sense, where it's in your blood, photons and different types of lenses and such.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then I'm scrolling through, and then you started working with like a branding agency. How did you make that switch?
Yeah, so I went to business school at NYU Stern, which is everyone that goes there goes either into investment banking or consulting. And so I came from technology, manufacturing, but there's something about the environment around you. I don't want to call it peer pressure, but when you go to school with, 250 others that are all talking about investment banking and consulting, and all the people that come to interview people, no one comes to business school to Stern to interview someone that can be a CEO of a optics company. So the interviews are all and the opportunities for internships and everything all around consulting and consulting and banking. Banking for me was out of the question. I'm just not that type of guy. Consulting was something I felt like I wanted to try, but marketing specifically is something I always felt like, is really the essence of everything we do. I mean, when you talk about starting a startup, putting the technical idea aside and all of that, half of what you're doing is marketing. You're out in front of venture capitals, you're out in front of investors, you're trying to raise money. That's marketing all day long. And so I took an opportunity of going to work with a brand consulting company, um, which was incredible, to be honest. I learned some incredible things there. And, I also learned that it's really not for me. I also, sometimes that's also important. I had to explore that, check it, check that box, see, okay, I tried to go the mainstreams. That's not me. I really need to go back into the manufacturing world, the technology world. I need to make product, not just PowerPoints. But there was something I did learn very, very interesting in that company. And Eric, the founder and owner of the company, is a brilliant, brilliant branding person who wrote some of the best books out there on it. But I learned from him something very interesting, and that is the perception part. So we worked with a company with O'Neill that is a surfing company. And when you work with O'Neill, you see they have a very strong brand perception of hardcore surfers. In fact, when we went to visit their headquarters, every day at noon, everyone drops everything and goes out surfing. So that's how hardcore they are, right? But at the end of the day, most of their revenue comes from school bags, t-shirts, sunglasses, sandals, everything else. That's where the real money comes from. But everyone that buys that because, of that sort of secondary effect of feeling like a professional surfer. So, sure, you can go out to the store and you can buy a dozen t-shirts from other companies that might have a surfing board printed on them or something like that, or a wave or thing. But the feeling you get wearing a t-shirt that is O'Neill, which is definitely considered the most hardcore, professional surfer, you get a secondary effect there, right? And learning that and understanding how much the perception is really the key to it was a key, because that goes into many other things that you do every day in marketing.
No, I can imagine that just rippling through from people who want to wear the sneakers the pros wear in basketball to even something like a luxury item like an iPhone, where I have the
Yeah,
same iPhone that Jay-Z and other billionaires have. We're
exactly.
all pros, we're all the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
you
And
can
I had a
have that
boss
halo
one.
effect.
Yeah, I had a boss that used to call it the Corvette in the corner. You go into a showroom and there's a Corvette in the corner. You're not going to buy the Corvette. You're going to buy the, mid-level cars that you wanted and so on. But just having the presence of Corvette and knowing that it's made in the same plant and it's the same company gives you feelings that you're getting a bit more than just buying a mid-level car. And so that Corvette in the corner thing, which I learned from, the founder of 4Labs, Alex Cable, is a really powerful expression.
100%. No, I 100% agree with you. And it also reminds me of the idea of like first time founders are worried more about the product. And then the second time founders are thinking more about the distribution at the beginning.
I
And that
love
you
that.
kind of got
I
to
love
touch
that.
on both.
I heard that expression not long ago, and I started using it a lot because I found oftentimes with engineers, you have to stop them. It's like you don't have to keep adding features. You don't have to have the best product. Save something for Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4. Apple does that incredibly, right? By the time they release a new iPhone, they already have in the labs the next two generations that they're working on that have already new features. They're not holding back that iPhone and waiting to add that in. On the contrary, they want to already know that that one is going to be obsolete soon because they want you to already upgrade to the next version after that. So that's definitely a difference between first generation founders that thinks that it's all about the features and second generations that understand that, you just need to get out there, start getting it, start getting the revenue, and then, yeah, keep adding features. Definitely, you want to keep the differentiators there.
So let's fast forward about 15 years from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You're working at Thor Labs for a while as a leading designer and manufacturer of kind of photonic equipment. Then you go from there to the job as CEO of LightPath, literally as the pandemic starts. Tell me
Yeah.
about just kind of were you're interviewing through January and February and you're kind of
Yeah.
hearing about COVID but not worrying too much about it and kind of explain that like that 6 week span
Oh
of
my
your
God.
life to me.
Oh my God. The funniest thing is, while I was interviewing for LightPath, my wife, we were living in the US, in Virginia. My wife went to Thailand for a week to visit a girlfriend of hers. And on the way back, she's saying to me, maybe I'll wear a mask. I keep hearing these rumors about this funny, ammonia or something coming out of China. And just in case, I'll wear a mask. And she tells me, I flew all the way back from Thailand to the US. I was the only person on the flight wearing a mask. I felt so weird. And, 3 weeks later, a mask became like a mandatory, fashionable item, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, definitely. I interviewed while that was starting to unfold. Of course, we all thought that has nothing to do with us, right? We all remember Mike Pence standing out there saying, oh, we contained COVID in the US. We had one plane come in with thing and it's under control and that's it, right?
Yep.
And I felt that it's under control. I signed my contract. I announced I'm starting. We were living in Virginia. The company is headquartered in Florida. My plan was to stay in Virginia until the end of the school year and then move the family, fly back and forth all the time. I flew down here, on a Monday, spent 5 days here, 4 days here, said to everyone on the Friday, okay, I'm leaving back to Virginia for the weekend. I'll see you on Monday. And then I couldn't see them for another 4 months.
Oh,
So my work as a CEO included 4 days on site, meeting like 10 people out of 350, and then 4 months with meeting no one in person. And then after that, even when I could come down to Florida because we just moved in the middle of COVID, I couldn't visit my factory in Latvia for 2 years and my factory in China for another year. And so it was quite hell of an introduction, but apparently you can achieve quite a bit without physically going there. So,
That's what I was going to ask real quick. Is
yeah.
that were there certain redundancies and different things that you got to build out since you had all these constraints in the beginning that now are kind of paying dividends because you go, well, now I don't have to go to Latvia every month because I figured it out, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing we made sure very early on is because we were worried, like everyone, of shutdowns or facility shutdowns. And so we developed a redundancy to make sure there isn't any process that is not done in at least two facilities. So we don't depend on one facility for one process only. The only exception is there's one process done only in Orlando, but there are also competitors we can use for that process. So if needed, we have some external backup for that. But that definitely worked out well, even though we never had to go through a shutdown in the formal way of an infection and all of that. We did have periods where, for example, in Latvia, 60% of the factory was out in isolation or exposed, right? And so on. And we had a period even in China where, people had to sleep in the factory because they had to, they were locked down for 2 weeks there. But it did work out well. It helped also now with geopolitics and us de-emphasizing our China operation. When I came on board, the company was very, very focused on manufacturing in China. That is something that I was changing from day one, even before the pandemic sort of hit in our face. It was already sort of the writing on the walls that we can't just, depend on China on everything. And so we've been de-emphasizing the China operation. Really, everything we do in China, have been doing in China, we can do elsewhere. And having another low-cost manufacturing center in Latvia really helps a lot because the cost of labor in Latvia is not that much higher than China necessarily. And so we're able to transition some operations and some activities over there pretty well.
So I touched on it a little bit, but I would love for you just to give a proper introduction to LightPath and what you all do before I
Yeah,
start getting into
absolutely.
some kind of deeper questions about LightPath.
Yeah, so if you would ask me 4 years ago, LightPath was an optical component company making lenses. And it had some very unique technologies for making lenses, precision molding, like injection molding of plastic, some diamond turning, and so on. But when I came on board 4 years ago, it was obvious that that is being commoditized and that remaining as a component company in optical components is going to be just a race to the bottom. And so we worked very hard on our strategy and identified that our unique capabilities that allowed us for years to differentiate ourselves on the component level can also be leveraged to make much more than components. And so we've been transitioning into a system company. We started by making assemblies and saying, okay, instead of buying in a few individual components and assembling them, let us design the assembly for you and we'll put it together. Think of a camera lens. You buy back when we had an SLR camera and you would buy a lens to fit on your Nikon camera, we would make that lens assembly. So that was the first step. That's already 20% of the business and so on. The next step after that, through acquisitions and through more of an investment in R&D, was to go and make the camera itself. And now we've been transitioning into a camera solution provider. And so you can look at it in terms of what are we selling? 4 years ago, we were selling glass. We were selling lenses that would cost maybe $2 a lens or maybe $50 a lens, maybe $100 for a really, really high-end lens. We went into making assemblies. The assemblies would sell anywhere from $100 to say $800. Now we're making cameras that sell anywhere from $1,000 to $30,000. So we've been climbing up the food chain by really leveraging the unique technologies that we have on the materials, on the glass, on the lenses, on optical design, and adding more unique capabilities for acquisitions. We acquired a year ago Visimid, which brought in some video analytics capabilities and video engine capabilities that allowed us actually this week to announce a really, really cool new product that integrates AI into the camera video pipeline. On the camera level, you can now deploy AI. So you don't need to even have a separate computer. You don't need to worry about, okay, which GPU do I choose? What computer? Do I get a Raspberry Pi? Do I get a high-end computer? You can, if you have a module that's already trained and ready, you can just download it directly into the camera and seamless. It will be already in the video pipeline. So it's differentiators like that allow us to go from the $20 lens to the $10,000 camera.
And then is the AI, is that on like a subscription model too? Or is it just come built into the hardware?
So it's a hardware. So, what we realized, we had a lot of conversations with customers, and we realized that the world does not need another AI company developing AI modules. There are plenty of those, and people do incredible work, I have to say. I mean, really, really incredible.
And spending lots of money.
Yeah, spending lots
Yeah.
of money, buying GPU time, buying hardware. What we understood from customers, their two biggest challenges are all about how to actually deploy AI once they have it already trained and developed. And there's two options. One is you can work in the cloud and Amazon Web Services and different functions like that. That works really well if you're in your office and you have a pipeline and you have like a gigabit Ethernet connection and endless video. If you want to install 20 cameras in your factory and to run AI, you cannot pipeline the video stream from 20 cameras to the cloud nonstop 24/7. A, it would take an enormous amount of bandwidth. And B, your IT would not allow you because of cybersecurity limitations. We're talking about customers that integrate AI and want to use it in power plants, in military applications, in places like that. No one is going to pipeline anything out there in that way. I mean, the cybersecurity requirements today are very, very tight on that. So it has to be done within their internal network. So then you can either buy a really high-end server, install it there in your plant, and run the AI there and maybe get, a license, something like that for the computing, or maybe buy an NVIDIA high-end. Or you want to do it really on the camera level and not even need to pipeline it back. And this is where we come in. We integrated an AI chip, an AI accelerator. It's essentially just like, today you can buy an FPGA from Xilinx. And instead of designing your own integrated circuit silicon, you can just program the FPGA with your code, and it would run as if it's silicon. So this is the same here. This is a chip that's similar to an FPGA, but specific for AI. And you can come with your module and with very, very clean and easy software, literally just compile it into the chip, put it there, and it will run in the camera. And now you can install, and now you can set triggers. And now you can say, okay, you know what? Don't pipeline the video until event A or B happens. You identify a person, an intruder comes in. You're identifying a fire starting. The object is overheating and is going above a certain temperature. Then start pipelining the video back and set an alarm off. And then someone will come and look at the video. But until then, don't bother with piping the video back because I don't need it. I only want to know when something is happening, right? So when you look at the use cases for AI in the real world, I'm not talking about generative AI. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about like implementing AI to actually do something in a factory, in a hardware, on a drone, anything like that. At the end of the day, it's specific events that they want to detect. And so this allows for an easy integration of that.
So I talked to a decent amount of like career CEOs where they were CEO of a bakery and now they're CEO of an insurance company. And it's kind of that nice. they're a career CEO and they know how to manage people and how to grow revenue one way or another. It's obvious that you have an extreme expertise in the actual field you're in. How much is that a competitive advantage when you're just describing what the customers want, that you have a really in-depth knowledge of exactly what all these companies do and actually like wrote the book on it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg, right? It's, are we successful because because I'm technical and, I like to say I'm a frustrated engineer. I know the concepts really well. I have great ideas, but I'm not good at the engineering parts. I went into management. But, are we successful because of that? Or have we taken this route and this strategy because this is what I know well and this is what I want to do? Right? I mean, and this is a chicken and egg. Many CEOs, I think, aren't necessarily fully aware, many people aren't necessarily fully aware of how their own wants and desires affect sort of how they shape the company and what they do. So to me, I'm eyes wide open at it. This is what I love doing. And probably this is part of the reason why I took that direction with the company. But definitely being highly integrated into what our customers do and what the technology is helps me, develop a company that I like to think of it. It's like a startup in a sense of developing new technologies, new capabilities, running quickly, but it's a startup with real manufacturing and real revenue behind it. So, you don't often get to run a startup that has already a $35 million revenue and has already 3 manufacturing plants and 300 employees and so on. So it's a unique combination, but definitely part of this is deep inside. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a technologist, and I just love taking that direction.
Awesome. So, deep diving a bit into your kind of last quarterly earnings report and such.
Yeah.
The revenue from engineering services seems to be growing by far the fastest out of all the different categories and business offerings that you have out there. How do you plan to kind of double down on the success of engineering services since it seems to be on fire?
So the nice thing about engineering services is that engineering services revenue today leads to revenue in the future on the sort of assemblies and cameras product. And $1 in engineering services will lead to $10 in camera sales. So when you look at engineering services, this is, for example, Lockheed Martin paying us $7.5 million to develop a new camera system that later will bring $100 million in revenue. So the nice thing about, when you own a key technology and something that's very, very unique, you get to double dip. You get to get NRE money or engineering services money to integrate that technology into the customer's product, whether it's slight modifications or adaptations and so on. And then you get to make the real money on shipping the product once the development part is done. So I'm glad you brought that up because many people don't realize it. That growth in engineering services now is incredible. It's incredible not in the engineering services revenue, but actually in the engineered products revenues that will come a year or two down the road after that. So again, I'd say a $10 million in engineering services turns into $100 million in product revenue 2 years later.
You mentioned Boeing. It had me thinking as I was looking through. You have a lot of, say, defense or military type customers, and it seems like since the Last Supper, when they trimmed down to about 4 or 5 prime contractors for the military. In the last 5 or 10 years, it seems like I'm hearing about a new person who's trying to become a new prime military contractor every 2 weeks, raising venture capital. How has the kind of the landscape of defense tech now being cool, changed how you sell to customers?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember 4 years ago, before I joined LightPath, I was dwelling with doing different things, and one of them was to go into private equity. And I looked at the companies that was related to gun sites, and the private equity investors said, no, not cool. No one wants to invest in anything related to that. Like you can't do that. And today, it's the next big thing. I mean, look at Anduril, the newest really prime, if you would, right? The up and coming prime. Who were they? I mean, these are guys that were Facebook. They developed sort of the coolest video gaming before and went into that. I mean, that's a great example. Absolutely, defense is now cool. And as the CEO of Plantier said just the other day, we make products that help save lives by killing the bad people, and there's nothing to be ashamed about it. And so, those are his words, not mine, but definitely I feel like there is nothing to be ashamed about enabling our soldiers to do a better job and eventually saves their lives by being has a better advantage.
No, 100%. And yeah, Alex Cart from Palantir is always must see TV whenever he gets a microphone in front of him because
He
yeah,
is. He's
he's
pretty
definitely one
cool.
of the
Yeah.
more outspoken ones.
Yeah.
Well, I got a quick fire question of I'm looking around at it makes all the sense in the world why you would manufacture something in China, but how did the company stumble upon Latvia?
So, about 8 years ago or so, the company acquired a US company called ISP Optics that was founded by Joseph Menaker and Mark Lifshitz, two great guys in optics, in the world of optics, that both originated out of Latvia. And when they moved to the US and started their company here, they set up a manufacturing center in Latvia that allowed them to do low-cost manufacturing in Latvia, but really for the US market. And so when we acquired ISP Optics, we got a Latvia facility with it, and I'm very happy we did because that turned out to be great for us in more than one way. I mean, besides being a great manufacturing facility that is run really well and an incredible team there, it allowed us to now become vertically integrated in Europe and earn just a couple of weeks ago our European defense license, which means
Congrats.
that we can now provide to European prime companies. Just like in the US, the Lockheed and Raytheon and Boeing want only products made in the US, in Europe as well. The European defense primes, the defense companies, the Department of Defense of all the European countries want product only made in Europe. The fact that we can now do product beginning to end in our facility inside the EU as part of NATO has opened up the door to us to potentially tens of millions of dollars of new revenue.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we wrap up here, and you said your company is covering aerospace, you're going into the outer space, your military tech, AI, all the coolest fields at once. What do you see as like the next major growth driver? Is it acquisitions? Is it new IP and products that you're going to come up with? What makes you excited for the next 10 years?
Yes, I think it's a combination of things. One thing that I took out of business school and learning with all the finance people is diversification. You never want to be betting on one thing. So you always need to have in your pipeline 4 or 5 opportunities that you need just one of them to succeed, right? I mean, if 2 of them do, even better, right? So we have now 2 major defense opportunities that could be $100 million a year of revenue, right? Lockheed Martin and another airborne system. So check already on 2. We have automotive, in which everyone is starting to work on integrating thermal imaging into emergency braking system or ADAS. We're already qualified into one of the car companies. We have a potential with them of about $50 million a year. So, and that's just one car company.
And that's by law moving forward, right? The
What's
auto
that?
braking, the auto
Yeah.
braking. It's So they're
Yeah,
all going
exactly.
to be
That's
forced
the
into it.
department, right? So by 2029, it's mandatory in all new vehicles. So DOT or National Transportation Agency announced just about a month ago that it's going to be mandatory to everyone. So that's another one. Acquisition is definitely another big one. And then, just you look at the camera business, and we announced cameras that sell for $10,000, $30,000. We're going into, just the power plant markets. It's $500 million a year in preventive maintenance using thermal cameras. And there's enough opportunities there. I think of it as we have almost nearly 10 opportunities in our pipelines that each one of them alone can be tens of millions of dollars of revenue. So any one of those 10 opportunities could double our size. I just need 2 of them, 3 of them, and I'm set.
No, it's almost back to like you were saying as a startup, as you're kind of like a venture capitalist making these little bets in these emerging markets and such. And like you said, the power plants I hear about a new nuclear power plant being opened up every freaking month, some country and stuff. And so never been a better time to build power plants and such.
Cannot emphasize enough how important the diversification is. One thing I learned from the startup world is don't bet on one thing, because more chances of it failing than not. Better try and have 10 things, and maybe 2 of them or 3 of them will work out.
Well, Sam, I can't thank you enough for awesome interview and coming on the podcast. If people would like
Great.
to learn more about you and LightPath Technologies, where's the best place for them to head?
The LightPath website, of course, is a great place. There's also a contact form, because anyone that wants can actually contact me directly through there. So in the contact form of the CEO, those go directly to me. Feel free. I answer everything as much as I can. and would encourage people to learn about us and to check out the stock price also.
Yep. And for everyone interested, it's lightpath.com. And yes, the contact form works. That's how I got connected with Sam. So
Yeah.
he's not bluffing. Thanks again, Sam, for coming on the podcast. And for those still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. And thanks again.
Thank you, Will.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefore by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast Express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this